made ourselves familiar with this incredibly significant piece.
Right.
Yeah.
And that, to me, is what Cats is going to look like in 100 years.
Well,
That it's going to be in a textbook and somebody's going to say, yes, Cats changed the definition of musical theater, but no one's going to actually...
Right.
Right.
You're gonna be like, I have 800
Who-
other things that I
So-
should and need to be
Yeah.
So in 100
seeing, reading, whatever.
So in 100 years, is like, are we gonna be talking about Cats that way? But are we still gonna be doing Oklahoma?
I think you are.
That's
Yeah.
And I'm really,
I do.
I'm sad to say it, but I think you are, because I think I think Oklahoma is more important than Cats.
I
As
would
far
agree with
as,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That's.
I mean,
Um,
because here's the
yeah.
thing, Showboat is still being done.
Yeah.
Showboat was an incredibly significant development in musical theater. It's still being done.
Right.
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 Oklahoma's still being
At the same
by
time,
every high school in the nation.
And
Twice a
it's
year.
just- Isn't it that lyric?
how many of us have actually
Lyric
watched the
just
video of
did
Thomas
it.
Edison sneezing? The
Right.
first video. How many of us have been like, oh, I can't wait to see this? Obviously, it's the most important video of all time. The most important, video recording of all time. But
Right. We all know about
we all
it.
know it
We've
exists,
watched
but
it.
why do we have to see it?
Thomas Edison is history's greatest monster. There we go.
Yes. Agreed. He did by-
Thank you, Tesla, for
Thank
being
you,
who you
Tesla.
are.
You're great.
Thank you. Thanks,
Okay.
Nikki.
Go
Thank you,
Tesla.
Tesla.
Okay.
Thank you,
I love
Tesla forever.
eugenics.
Thank you,
Uh-oh.
Tesla forever.
Tesla forever.
All right,
We're all really drunk.
Thanks.
Damn it, Christine.
We'll fix it
Thank
in
you.
post. We'll fix it in post.
Okay, we're
Lunch.
Okay, ready and.
all right. We're coming to the end, finally, of this catastrophe. All right, so we have a group. I have a group of questions that I put to everybody, but for the record, they are: 1, how can you make classical plays more relatable to modern audiences? 2, what are your opinions of black box / minimalist productions of classical plays? And 3, then this is purely on an individual basis. How far back in time is too far back? At what point does a play become impossible to relate to or connect with on just purely for yourself? For example, I mentioned earlier when we were on a break that too far back for me is Trojan Women. I'm a huge fan of Greek mythology, but Trojan Women is just ghastly to me. So, starting off with Ashley, since she has been here the least amount of time.
Okay.
I'm sorry, are we on the too far back question right now?
Whatever
any of
you
those?
whatever you'd
Any
like
of
to
those.
talk about.
Great. Classical theater, I do not mind in a black box or a small production, a minimalist production of a piece of classical, because I think that, for obvious reasons, and Shakespeare's a good example of setting different pieces in different time periods if they work, or in giving them different circumstances. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. But I feel like trying new things, if there is a reason or some kind of reasoning behind it, that it makes something maybe interesting for somebody who may have not, or may even have seen it before, but even a new audience member who might be seeing it for the first time. I don't think it's absolutely necessary. That's not what I'm saying. I think doing a classical piece as it's meant to be done, with stage directions and where it's set, naturally and all that good stuff, is fine. But I'm not opposed to doing it in a different way.
I think that in reaction to your question, Brian, about how do you make classical theater relevant or interesting to a modern audience, for me, and I, if I'm alone here, then I'm alone here, but for me, it's simply by just not being a dick about it.
Yeah.
It's about not saying, here's this theater that's, so elevated or so important that I can't relate to it. It's about not doing theater that's, as we discussed before, shitting Marvel. I think throughout my theatrical career, it's been pretty heavily established that my suspension of disbelief is actually pretty minimal. That I rely really heavy really heavily on the idea of realism and relatability. And what do these words actually mean? What are the situations that we're actually talking about? You know, what's inferred? What's important here? And I think that the people who are shitting Marvel with their Shakespeare or their classical pieces, their Moliere, their Greek, are forgetting they're forgetting what theater is about. You cannot have theater. Theater does not exist without an audience. And the minute that you alienate that audience, the minute that you forget that they are important, is the minute you cease to do theater.
Unless you're Brecht.
Unless you're Brecht.
Then you want to alienate the audience. That's your goal. Everyone hates you for it. You get away with it.
Right.
I am going to add on to Emma and answer another one of Brian's questions is, as far as how back theater can go, I don't really know, personally.
Well, I mean, I don't mean like in general. I meant like for you, like
For me,
for
I, as I've said before, I'm more of the modernist school of theater. I am drawn to it more, but I feel like even, and this is a little different because it's not watching it, it's doing it. We did a scene from Agamemnon, didn't we do?
Oh my God!
No,
It was the Bacchae.
No, it was the woman. What's her? It's the daughter.
Electra?
Oedipus's daughter.
Did we really?
What is
no,
her name?
I just had it.
So with an E.
Anyway.
Antigone.
Antigone.
Antigone!
Oh my God!
Which
I
is an
forgot
A.
we did that
Yeah.
scene.
That's besides the
We
point.
just
But we
The
did
vowel sound.
we did a scene from Antigone, and I remember doing that scene, and obviously it's a translation, and it might have been translated by someone 5 years ago. So I don't know how actually modern the translation was. But I remember doing that scene, and I remember it didn't change my life, but I remember connecting to it. I remember it being real, and I remember wanting to produce it about how much a daughter, a child, essentially, loved her father or her brother and wanted to bury her brother. That's what the scene was about. And I remember it seeming not as important. It's not like I was shattered by it, but I remember it seeming rather timeless.
Yeah. Well, the thing for me, and that comes down to, I don't know, again, our very different personal experiences with theater, for me and you, Sarah, is I remember doing that scene with you and thinking that it was the first time that you and I really connected. And it was after about a year of knowing each other and doing theater with each other that suddenly, we could stand outside because we did
the
it
other
outside.
thing we set it outside of the the point of the project was to set your theater somewhere normal. So we were just around campus, and the whole class was doing scenes of classic theater in normal settings.
And we chose to do ours basically in a cafeteria.
Yeah.
It was basically just sort of a dinner conversation, and it was the first time that you and I could come together on this, like, here's this incredibly classical piece, sort of set in a modern
in a
environment.
place where we sit as people every day.
And we talk every day.
Yeah.
And it was, it was right outside of the college Starbucks, and it was this first place where we, as theater practitioners, found common ground.
Right. And I think, to circle back to your question, I don't think there's a certain place that can move beyond what I would watch. I think there are productions that are beyond what I would watch. Okay. I think I can watch a production of the most true to its nature Antigone or the Trojan Women or the Bacchae, something old, and connect to it more than I could a production of Hamlet or of an absurdist piece that was made too abstract. I don't think it's a time for me. I think it's a mode of production.
Okay.
Well, Aaron brought up something while we were on a break
Oh, good for me.
about
Shut up.
about how the place where he sort of gets lost, where he's like out of theater, is where there's a chorus in a straight play.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And as much as I get that, I feel like there are examples in more modern drama, and forgive me because my example is in fact musical, where that idea of a Greek chorus works really well, and that without
Assassins?
I was actually thinking of Sweeney Todd.
Oh. Okay.
Yeah. No, I meant time period wise. When you get back to the point where they're starting to still use the Greek chorus, the Greek chorus itself doesn't throw me.
Mhm.
It's that's around the time when the shows start getting a little more difficult, not to understand because there are really good translations of it, but they start just being stories that I can't specifically relate to. Doesn't mean that I don't enjoy them when they're done well, but they don't connect to me super well.
There's another element of that I would like to just bring up for the sake of having brought it up, which is that Greek theater doesn't sell.
Yeah. Yeah.
It does not.
You cannot do it. You don't make money. In fact, you make negative amounts of money when you try to do Greek theater.
And that's a whole other topic of when does theater become what's producible? You know,
Right.
when does theater become what's
Which brings us
profitable?
back to what we were talking about at the very beginning of this podcast, which is how, if classic theater is a date, then it's one thing. But if classic theater is something that is produced, that was written before a certain date, but is still produced today, then it's a completely different issue.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that the people who try to do classic theater now, especially the people who try to do classic theater without some sort of twist, or some sort of like, look at this fancy modern, thing, they don't make any
No.
money.
And I think that goes right into, if I was answering some of Brian's questions, I think the three of them, I think I can kind of try to see if I can tie as much in as possible. How do you make a classic show relatable to a modern audience? I would say that if you